the organization that deals with leases for government offices that are in buildings that are owned by the government, and the procuring of pens and pencils and computers and pretty much all the stuff that a government would want to use. They have authority over approving spending for the transition, that is, the movement from the incumbent president to the president-elect, and that funds, therefore, office space for the incoming president and his staff as it grows, and formal authority for them to consult with each of the government agencies and to get briefings and to access the daily classified intelligence briefing, and also to begin the process of getting the security clearances for very senior people who will be appointed to positions. All of that is necessary so that a new government can happen. I would explain that the reason why we go through that whole process in the U.S. is because, unlike a parliamentary democracy, which would have a shadow government ready to step in, somebody already identified as foreign minister or interior minister or defense minister and so forth, the United States, because it's a presidential form of government, the new president gets to pick his or her cabinet, and it may not include any members of Congress. It might, but it doesn't have to. And if they are asked and if they agree, then they have to resign their seats in the House of Representatives or in the Senate anyway. So this several month period between the election and the inauguration, the swearing in, is crucial to get things organized, to get them started, to get them made coherent. You don't just suddenly captain the ship without having a crew.
Now, what I also found interesting is, obviously, this was a letter that was written by the General Services Administrator, Emily Murphy. Now, in this letter, what is interesting to note, Brooks, is it actually failed to refer to Biden as the president-elect, despite obviously giving him the go-ahead that he could begin the transition.
Yeah, well, it's because in a very technical, informal sense, the electors, that is, the people representing the various states, the weight of the states, California with 55 electors and New Hampshire with 3 and so forth, those votes have not been formally certified yet with the House of Representatives. That only comes on December 14th. So in a very sort of mean-spirited and technical kind of way, we're using the word mean-spirited a lot, aren't we? In a mean-spirited way, she was right not to refer to him as the president-elect, but for all intents and purposes, most everybody is accepting the fact that it is true and there's no going back. And Donald Trump's re-election campaign has tried 40-some times now before judges to get various aspects of the vote count changed or overturned or put in abeyance, and they have won exactly one of them in a very, very minor case, which affected very few number of votes. And as a result, there's no, on planet Earth, there's no particular way that the election results will be reversed for the president. So president-elect for you and me, and not quite president-elect for Emily Murphy, I guess.
Yes. Now, obviously, when one looks at Donald Trump now, where to from here for Donald Trump now that we also know that, the transition is happening, and also at the same time in terms of challenging the results of the elections and the lawsuits that are going absolutely nowhere at this point in time, Brooks?
Well, where to for Donald Trump is pretty simple at this point. Come January 20th at 12:01 in the afternoon, he's a private citizen and he has no more effect on the operations of government than I do or you do, and that's as it should be, because Joe Biden will take the oath of office the military aide who walks discreetly behind the president with that infamous suitcase that has or briefcase that has the nuclear launch codes in it, rapid communications anywhere, transfers to Joe Biden. All of the authority of the presidency slides seamlessly over to Joe Biden, despite all these ructions and all the screaming and yelling and arm waving and haranguing and tweeting. And Donald Trump will find that nobody in the federal government will take his instructions because they've all taken an oath, uphold the Constitution, and carry out their duties rather than to pay obeisance to Donald Trump. And that also is as it should be. The military, by the way, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest in rank terms, in position terms, not necessarily rank, but position terms, member of the armed services, subservient to the Secretary of Defense, but in uniform individual, General Mike Milley. He sent an all commands memo out some weeks ago. Memo is not quite strong enough. It was effectively printed on screaming red paper with lights all around it, to say in effect, just remember, folks, our oath is to the Constitution to obey lawful orders. In case you didn't understand that first paragraph, our oath is to the Constitution and lawful orders and not to an individual. Putting everybody on notice that the president doesn't get the right to issue unlawful orders to do this, that, or the other thing to keep himself in power. And yet another potential threat was blunted by that memo. So at every front, the Trump campaign, the re-election campaign, has been thwarted in its efforts, and he's now reduced to angry tweets, swipes on the golf course at the ball with his putter, and fulminations in private. He doesn't like to be a loser, but unfortunately, on this round, he lost. So he becomes a private citizen. He goes back to wherever he claims is his residence, whether it's in Florida or New York City. And in New York, especially, there are a fair number of prosecutors lined up to have a very close look at his finances and his claims of tax deductions and the way in which his money has been spent and the way in which he either has or hasn't paid appropriately and legally for services. He's going to be very busy with lawyers and with accountants and with prosecutors at the federal and the state level. There are also claims that the Internal Revenue Service, the American equivalent to SARS, has an ongoing dispute with him over $79 million worth of tax deductions that he has claimed, which may or may not be legal according to the IRS. They're looking at it yet again. And the final, I guess, the crowning difficulty for him is there is hanging over his head something on the order of $400 million. Now, to figure out what that means in rand, we have to add another zero and multiply it by another half. So what does that mean? That's it's a lot. Well, it's a lot of money. I can't do this math this early. It's too complicated for me. It's more money than I have. But these are loans that he's personally signed for his various business efforts, as opposed to being limited liability loans for a company or a corporation. His signature at the bottom, promising to repay, and many of them come due somewhere in the next 4 years. That means there's going to be an awful lot of effort to earn some money to pay this, in addition to paying the lawyers and the accountants who will keep him out of trouble with various prosecutors. It's going to be a busy time, and although he's making quiet noises about running for re-election in 2024, and people keep asking about that of me, I keep saying, remember, there are all these other people, uh, younger senators, former officials like Mike Pompeo, who's still Secretary of State but won't be for much longer. All of them, they're going to want their shot at becoming the presidential nominee for the Republican Party in 2024. And Donald Trump will be a particularly old man by then, by comparison to his relatively youthful vigor now. So he's going to be busy, but it's not the busy you'd hope for, I think.
Well, Brooks, that's very, very interesting, and definitely we will definitely follow developments. And as always, we do appreciate your time with us here on Salam Media. Please take care, and all the best to you, sir.
And you take care of yourself.
Brooks Spector joining us this morning against the background of Donald Trump, and finally the transition to power to Joe Biden is starting to happen.
Osman's Taj Mahal Spice and Rice. For over 80 years, Osman's Taj Mahal have been perfecting the art of the perfect